There is a belief that women are, in the literal sense, monogamous, while men seek constant variety. However, Tibetan marriage customs dispel this myth and prompt us to reflect on how people lived in ancient times when the foundations seemed inviolable and indisputable. In feature films, we often see a scene. A young woman uses the friendship and trust of several men at once, as if friendship here substitutes for other paths of fate. But in Tibet, there were other, harsher real practices that went beyond the realm of fiction and film cliches. It is there that, for one girl, sometimes as many as 10 brothers were married to her, all of them related to each other and, as a rule, belonging to the same family. Such was the essence of such marital unions. The bride united under her name several men who were closely related to each other by blood and kinship. Questions arise. How was the wife shared among 10 brothers, and what happened when she crossed the threshold of the dwelling in the company of an entire retinue of guests? Did the dwelling expand to accommodate a crowd of guests, or did it preserve the same space with the addition of new people? The more official key in the lock that had to be turned, the more the bride seemed to become noticeable and significant in the eyes of society. We mentally turned to photographs of real Tibetan girls who were lucky enough to experience such a marriage, to see how their destinies played out in reality. Before embarking on reflections, it is worth a warning. This topic is, to put it mildly, delicate, and requires listening to it in private, without outsiders. Ancient Tibetan traditions spoke without a shadow of doubt. The bride went to her husband and his relatives, that is, to all the groom's brothers, if they were considered the closest relatives by blood. Such an arrangement was considered easily explainable. It, as was claimed, ensured the stability of the family welfare, since all the brothers lived in one family and held the family property in common ownership. If you think about it, there is some logic here. When a family holds to one house and one woman, the risk of discord among financiers and schemers who would want to profit from someone else's property is reduced, because one would have to hide not from one person, but from an entire line of relatives. However, such a system also creates risks, deceiving not one, but 10 people, a task quite difficult and risky. The question of the bride's selection was decided by the elder brother. He was considered the head and had the right to shape the future union, while the other brothers had to accept his tastes and decisions. This could not be fair in all cases, but those were the rules of the game and the inherent features of the tradition. For many brides, polygyny meant a chance to achieve prestigious status. Many aspired to come under the guardianship and blood of the one who had more brothers by kinship. But what happened if the youngest brother did not accept such a state of affairs and wished to choose his own path? Could one break the established pattern and act according to one's own wishes, not following the elder's command? In theory, such a possibility existed, and sometimes it was realized, though it faced considerable opposition and considerable risk. Thus, the ancient way of life demanded not only tolerance, but also readiness to compromise, where each participant was assigned his or her own role and place in the system, which no one considered ideal, but everyone accepted as a given. And therefore the topic remains delicate, controversial, and worthy of a careful, thoughtful look. There existed a strange and almost legendary rule. A young man had to completely sever ties with his family and go to live on his own, taking with him only personal belongings, most often some clothes and a few small domestic items. Essentially, he remained without a roof over his head, because all significant material valuables stayed in the house, and the autonomous younger brother was not entitled to claim them. Do you think there were people who dared to make such a break? And how did women perceive this unusual wedding rule? Usually the attitude toward it was positive, with rare exceptions. Not all young brides felt the same toward their future husband. Usually the warmest response was elicited by the elder brother or the principal fiancé, and thus a certain, if somewhat clear, hierarchy in the relationships arose. On the men's side, there was an effort to please the wife. The harder they worked and the higher their income, the greater the chance of occupying the honored place of the beloved husband. But there were also those who did not want to work for the lady, and, refusing duties, tried to shirk any work altogether. It was said that such unwavering persistence could be the reason the wife had the legal right to expel an unreliable husband from the house. And here things were not so simple. Before making a decision, the fiancé had to talk with the mother of the husband and explain the situation. The mother-in-law, for her part, tried to justify the lazy man and assured that he would turn to the path of truth and begin to work, perhaps even like Papa Carlo for three, as the folk imagery put it. Similar stories are not rare even today, though in a different form, and with the caveat that it concerns only one husband. As can be seen, family relationships are largely similar across our land and around the world. As for the marital duty itself, of course, everything happened out of love, but the theory stated the wife was to serve all husbands to the full. In practice, however, this did not always happen. Women often chose favorites and went to be with them, while the other husbands had the lawful right to their shares. Sometimes this could involve only a single husband. Then the others had to exercise their rights to the so-called ritual hops. After that, the wives had to arrange a sequence of meetings with all of them in turn, and this was controlled to prevent the situation from reaching extremes. Wives had to maintain order so that attention would not be scattered and would not lead to chaos in the house. We were told of times when children born within a marriage were considered belonging to the elder brother. He became their official father, although upbringing was carried out by all family members, without exception. In such conditions, it often happened that younger brothers took secret wives. Today they are called mistresses, and if such unions bore children, they had no rights. Secret wives were rarely helped to raise the children, and their fate was sad. Raising a child alone in such a place was extremely difficult. There were cases in a polygamous family consisting of a wife and 5 husbands when the woman could not bear a child. Often this was explained by hereditary diseases of men or genetic incompatibility. And then an outsider appeared who helped to do everything properly and returned home. The elder brother acknowledged the father and raised the child. At that time, other solutions were sought. Nowadays, such a situation is resolved through donors. The morals of Tibetan girls differed from the customs of Europe and the Russian Empire. Girls proudly told of their amorous exploits. There was no talk of innocence before marriage, and they openly said how many and where their path had led them. How could that be? It was simply explained. They wore a special necklace consisting of coins. During tea, the suitor would dip his tea infuser into the hostess's saucer, after which he would give her a coin, which she hung on the necklace. By the number of coins, one could count the number of guests the girl had interacted with. The more coins on the thread, the more enviable the bride seemed. If a stray foreign suitor appeared on her list, a coral bead adorned the necklace. Can you imagine such a thing in our time? If similar necklaces were worn by girls today, one could immediately understand how many suitors she had, and the more numerous they were, the more active her life seemed. In ancient Tibet, there existed an unusual and rarely encountered form of marriage, polyandry, or many husbands. Historical evidence indicates that such practice persisted for centuries, and even sometimes arose with the appearance of a foreign groom in the bride's biography, which was considered the pinnacle of skill within polyandry. The key driving force was economic logic. Poor families could not pay dowry to each son to arrange marriages for all their sons. Therefore, it was more advantageous to unite under one roof several brothers and marry off one woman than to divide the household into parts. This arrangement allowed preserving the integrity of the family property and not spending funds on separate marriages that could lead to ruin. Under one roof lived 2 and sometimes more branches of the clan, and together they managed the household so that common resources did not go astray. Over time, these 2 branches often merged into a single whole, turning a close-knit group into a strong family. However, this system also bred tension among relatives. Daughters-in-law condemned such a union, and the brides themselves sometimes provoked unfriendly attitudes and even legal proceedings. In Tibetan practice, there was also a pattern of behavior. The father-in-law would gladly plunge into an ice-cold hole, preparing clothes and belongings for himself, and no one prevented this. And a certain regularity emerges. Two different families living under one roof gradually merged into a single whole. This process gave rise to such practices and deeply entered the history of Tibetan family life. Today, such unions are rare and are maintained mainly in remote villages as an exception. Modern lifestyle and economic conditions have made such a model difficult to implement in practice and have reduced its prevalence. Nevertheless, history invites reflection on the feasibility of such a family arrangement in present-day conditions. And the question remains open. Does this form of marriage justify itself in the modern world, or will it remain a monument to a bygone era for a long time?